Hello, it's Josh Bloom here with you again as a guide, not a god. Because while I don't believe in gods, I do believe in guides. Some people feel that a god is a guide, and I abide, because we're all just trying to get through life, so here we go with the guidance. This is the latest edition of the 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom podcast, the weekly compilation of my daily 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump administration posts that originate on TikTok and then are reposted on the other typical resource wasting and universally demoralizing apps. By the way, the podcast is officially titled 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom because I was sick of seeing my face next to his name, quite frankly. Also, by the way, please don't let my characterization of resource wasting and universally demoralizing apps deter you from listening, following, and spreading the word about the podcast. This is only me being sarcastic, and if you like sarcasm, then please stick around. Speaking of resource wasting and universally demoralizing apps, I was watching the new Paul McCartney documentary for a writing project that will appear on my Substack and as an episode of the Josh Bloom podcast. I found it strange that even though I pay for Amazon Prime, I still had to sit through 3 minutes of ads before the movie began, and I never had to do that before. I suppose that I should be happy for Jeff Bezos, though. He must have been struggling financially, and I can only imagine how this new ad revenue is helping to ease his mind. Did you know that the Beatles' albums in the United States, specifically during the early years of their recording career, were often radically different from Beatles' albums throughout the rest of the world, specifically in their home country of England? It's true. For instance, the first Beatles album on Capitol Records in the US was titled Meet the Beatles. This album's track list and cover were different from its UK counterpart titled With the Beatles. I wanted to explain this about Meet the Beatles as a way to transition from talking about Paul McCartney to talking about meat. Much has been made on the internet in the last couple of weeks about the CEO of McDonald's. The biggest burger chain has introduced a new giant burger called the Big Arch, and in a fail that turned into more publicity for the sandwich than if it was not a fail, the CEO of McDonald's posted a video on social media of him introducing what he termed the restaurant's new quote-unquote product, and then taking a less than enthusiastic bite that was quickly goofed on relentlessly. The reviews I have read of the burger are generally so-so, and it is loaded with more calories than I can justify, so I will be passing. But the idea of calling food product stuck with me because I had heard the word recently in another meat-related context, and in this case, I rather enjoyed it. I was at the ShopRite, and the ground chicken that I like to buy and use in a deconstructed chicken burger, which I make with caramelized onions and melty American cheese, was on sale. This is an in-house brand and runs only $2.99 a pound when it is on special. Shout out to my friend Colleen, who literally knows the names of cows she gets her milk from, for shaming me over my loyalty to this ShopRite offering. I love that about her, actually. Anyway, I went to buy the chicken, and there was none. I saw one of the store's butchers near the chicken case. I knew she was one because she was wearing one of those long white coats that always have what appears to be the remains of murdered animals on it, and so I said, "Can I ask you a question?" By the way, I always ask if I can ask a question before asking it. I feel like this method yields the best results. She said yes, and I replied, "Do you have the ground chicken that's on sale?" She said, "We will have more tomorrow," and then added, "It's a beautiful product." Now, when I hear that, I don't think she is saying beautiful product as in this is something we sell, I think it is in butcher terms. In other words, this is something I produce, and to me, that carries value. To me, it means that she takes pride in her work, she takes pride in her section of the store, and she takes pride in the ground chicken that she stocks there. I didn't mean to make a chicken stock pun, but I will take it. Don't forget, if you want to watch the daily posts that comprise this weekly podcast in real time, you can do that on YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok if you're nasty. All of the links to my social media can be found at superjews.com. You can also watch on Substack, the platform where all of my long-form writing lives, including the illustrated posts that accompany my main podcast, simply titled The Josh Bloom Podcast. In case you were unaware, Substack is a platform by which writers can publish writing, which is then emailed as a beautiful, convenient newsletter to subscribers like you. So, when you hear me say, subscribe to my Substack, that means go to superjews.substack.com and just very easily and gently enter your email address. Here we go. Subscribe to my Substack. Thank you in advance. And now, let's get into 1,461 Days of Ignoring the Trump Administration, days 348 through 354. This week on the show, on day 348, I talk about how the leader of the Trump administration posted a racist image depicting Barack and Michelle Obama as monkeys. While Donald's racism is not surprising, this moment feels important in a specific way because it reminds me that we are nearing the end of his relevance. I have always said that he would take us to the bottom and beyond, which is where we can start rebuilding with what he has revealed to us about what we don't want to be in mind. To be clear, we don't want to be like one of history's most despicable human beings, Donald Trump. On day 349, I talk about the insult, "get your money up," which I have seen used online to shame people who complain about how expensive everything has become. I mention noticing coffee pods priced at $29 at the grocery store and suggest that when we see products that are overpriced out of greed, the answer doesn't need to be can't, it can be won't. Instead of telling people to get their money up, maybe our incompetent government should focus on getting prices down. On day 350, I talk about discovering just how popular Bad Bunny really is. I wasn't aware until he was scheduled to headline the Super Bowl halftime show, and Kid Rock was selected to headline a piece of crap. I also note how upset supporters of the leader of the Trump administration were about a Spanish-speaking performer, although I doubt they had a problem eating Mexican food while watching. The contrast between the joy of Bad Bunny's show and the piece of crap I mentioned earlier is noteworthy. On day 351, it's my birthday, and it's also the day that we reach 24% of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. How about giving me the gift of following the podcast? On this day, I take a moment to explain why I continue this series as a way to remain mindful, optimistic, and hopeful during trying times in our lives that try to steal our time away from living. As I say every day, I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. On day 352, I talk about discovering that Bad Bunny has also appeared as a WWE superstar, and my further surprise that more wasn't made of this when supporters of the leader of the Trump administration were protesting his Super Bowl appearance. Professional wrestling brings everyone together, after all. I recall a commentator saying that wrestling fans can always tell who the underdog is and who is abusing power, and how that is a pretty good microcosm of society, because eventually the population figures out who the real heel is. Spoiler, it's Donald Trump. On day 353, I remind listeners who Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss are. This mother and daughter are the Atlanta poll workers who were just doing their job as volunteers in our democracy and were falsely accused by former NYC Mayor Rudy Giuliani of helping to rig the 2020 election. Rudy spread hateful, racist lies about them, was sued for defamation, and lost those suits spectacularly. I think about these women often because they represent the best of us, while Rudy now represents what happens when America's mayor becomes America's shithead. On day 354, I talk about Texas Senate candidate James Tallarico and an interview he recorded for the Stephen Colbert program that never aired after pressure from the pussy-ass government. The clip has now been seen by far more people than it would have been if it had simply aired on CBS, and I found his comments about loving one's neighbor in line with my own, even if he is a suspicious Christian. While I also admire his former opponent for the Democratic nomination, Jasmine Crockett, I have a feeling Mr. Tallarico may end up winning this seat. I forgot to write the little quip that I send you off into the main part of the show with. This is the third week in a row that I did that, so maybe it is a sign to save it to write while I am recording so that I can hear myself typing it up while I'm editing the show. I have never heard myself hunt and peck before. How interesting. I will think this over and get back to you on the other side. Day 348 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. The leader of the Trump administration's post today of a picture of the very, very lovely human beings Barack and Michelle Obama depicted as monkeys is certainly not surprising, but I find it shocking in a way that maybe other people don't. I find it shocking for the obvious reasons, of course. It is another example of Donald Trump's completely out in the open racism. But also, I find it shocking because it tells me it is coming time. The end of his relevance is near. I have said over and over and over again during these 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration that he will take us to the very bottom. And this post is almost a too-on-the-nose example of that. No one who is paying any attention is surprised that the leader of the Trump administration is a racist, and in particular absolutely hates Barack Obama because he is everything that Donald Trump could never be. But what is particularly notable beyond that is the moment. The moment says, hey, we're kind of reaching the end of the line here. There's not a whole lot more I can put out there to let you know that I am just not the guy. The fact that we are seeing Republicans come out today to condemn this, not in a we better condemn this because that's what we are supposed to do kind of way, but in a kind of, I don't know if we should be this blatant about it kind of way, shows us that even though they are deeply unwell, they also recognize that this is now beyond politics or the future of their jobs or their delusional grip on power. It is now about whether they can even walk down the street in normal society. For these types of people, how they are perceived by others is the most important aspect of their lives. People who are not secure in who they are look to other people to define them, just like how Barack Obama defined Donald Trump so many years ago as the person who would make this post today. I am not surprised, but I am shocked in a certain kind of way. Keep ignoring the man who supports segregation and discrimination. In case you forgot, that means ignore the Trump administration. Day 349 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Get your money up.
This is an insult that I see people using in comments recently to try to shame the other person for not having the money to buy whatever they are complaining about not being able to buy, because everything, including essentials, costs so much more today than maybe they ever did. I saw what looks like price gouging myself today, but not in a, oh, I want to buy this and can't way, because when I see something expensive, it's not a can't, it's a won't. At the grocery store this morning, I noticed that there were some items that were so expensive. The shelf they were on was not wide enough to accommodate how many numbers needed to fit on the sign. This particular product was coffee pods, a product I wouldn't buy anyway because I never understood the point of a coffee pod. But this box of coffee pods was $29. I frankly don't ever remember seeing anything priced for $29 in a grocery store in my entire life. But there it was, some coffee pods that have likely been in that box and sitting on that shelf for weeks or maybe months, getting stale on the grocery store shelf, but still having the nerve to stare out at consumers living in the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration's America as if to say, trust me, bro, I am worth 29 of your increasingly less powerful dollars. I was there myself to buy 2 donuts, which I was going to enjoy as my afternoon snack. Those donuts were on sale, normally priced at $1.59 each. They were 40 cents off. That's a savings of 80 cents. I like having 80 cents. Since scaling back my career in the music business to spend more time with my writing, I can guarantee you that I've become the type of person that pays attention to when donuts are on sale. Why? A, I like donuts. B, I like sales. And C, when consuming donuts, I like to do it with my Panera Sip Club coffee, which I guarantee you I have also carefully strategized my access to. This gives you some insight into the life of a man who is frugal, but also doesn't react to anyone telling me to get my money up, because instead of concentrating on the false promises that getting money up implies, how about the government getting prices down? That seems to me like legitimate compensation for faithfully ignoring the Trump administration. Day 350 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I had only heard of Bad Bunny because a guy I dated for a short time used to style his hair like Bad Bunny until Bad Bunny changed the way he styled his hair. But when I heard that Bad Bunny was scheduled to be the halftime show at the Super Bowl, I was surprised because I realized he must be much bigger than I had imagined. I became even more intrigued when the leader of the Trump administration, and the supporters of the Trump administration seemed to be in a downright tizzy about how a Spanish-speaking performer would be headlining the show. Well, that day came and went, and it is astounding how incredibly popular this performance was. It is also astounding how sharply it contrasted with the competing performance that supporters of the Trump administration put on. That contrast is something I actually feel grateful for because it allowed me to feel like the relevance of the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration is continuing to dwindle. The disparity between the accolades, the viewership, and the genuinely good vibes of the Bad Bunny halftime performance compared to whatever that competing halftime performance was goes to show that as a country, as a community, and as a culture, we reject people who promote joylessness. To me, life is about seeking out joy. I talk about mindfulness, optimism, and hope as ways to cope with what we are going through right now, as forced upon us by the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration. But once this time has passed, those concepts will persist. I want to remain mindful, optimistic, and hopeful throughout my life because I can. I want to maintain those attitudes for the people I love. And if you are a performer like Bad Bunny and not Kid Rock, then you are probably bringing those attitudes to your performance too. That's why I like you. Congratulations to Bad Bunny on his halftime presentation and for continuing to ignore the Trump administration. Day 351 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Today is a special day. And why? Well, some may say that every day is a special day. I certainly do. But today is a very special day because today is my birthday. I am not someone who concentrates on birthdays. I think of life as very linear. Like I said, I celebrate each and every day. So frankly, every day might as well be my birthday. But since birthdays are a social custom, I will acknowledge it while also acknowledging another reason why today is so special. Today, day 351 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration represents 24%. That's right, 24%. We are through 24% of the 1,461 days. And what else does 24 represent? We have 24 hours in a day, and today is my birthday. God damn it, isn't that cool? I thought you might think so. That's why I pointed it out. I also want to point out, like I do every time we reach one of these milestones, why I do this. I continue this series as a way to remind myself to be mindful, optimistic, and hopeful while living through trying times that try to take my time away from living. The goal beyond entertaining myself and maybe you is to reclaim that time, regain my mind, and focus on what is important. As I say, I am not a self-help guru. I am just trying to help myself. And every time I sit down to write to you, I am really writing to me. It is a discipline. It is a positive habit. It is a way to cope with what we are going through together. If you want to wish me a happy birthday, I am not going to deter you. I am happy to be alive. I accept your salutations with glee and gratitude. But what is more important is our personal survival, our personal perseverance, and our personal sense of positivity as we get up each and every day to venture into a world that sometimes feels more uncertain than it ever has before. That feeling is understandable. I sympathize with it. And on the day of my birthday celebration, I encourage you, as I encourage myself, to ignore the Trump administration. Day 352 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. This user named Chris on Threads posted, "Tell me I'm not the last person on earth to learn that Bad Bunny is also a WWE pro wrestler." Like many people, I go in and out of following pro wrestling, and this news about Bad Bunny was also news to me. With all of the controversy about Bad Bunny amplified by the leader of the Trump administration and the Trump administration, I immediately wondered why his association with WWE wasn't mentioned more as a way to counter that narrative. I have a friend who has worked for WWE for most of his career, and when I brought this up, even he wasn't aware of Bad Bunny's WWE history. I sent him the clip Chris posted of Bad Bunny's entrance, and he was blown away. He rarely sees a pop like that. If you know, you know, and maybe you should know. Later, I heard political commentator Gene Costin discussing how pro wrestling fans at an AEW event in Las Vegas chanted F ICE recently, which led to discussing how wrestling fans span the political spectrum, which I also know and have experienced personally. She said something that stuck with me. She said wrestling fans can tell who the underdog is. They can tell who is misusing power. They do not like it. Sometimes people root for the rich asshole, which is why Donald is in the WWE Hall of Fame. But ultimately, people want to see the rich asshole get hit with a chair. I agree with that point of view. We do not like rich assholes, and we do not like being told what to do by them. I believe that even among supporters of the leader of the Trump administration, he risks turning heel in their eyes. In wrestling, turning heel means revealing yourself as the villain, and when someone attempts to exert power in ways that feel abusive or performative, eventually the crowd responds. This brings me back to wondering why more wasn't made of Bad Bunny's history with WWE. Going forward, we're going to have more and more opportunities to acknowledge and align with each other over what we agree on instead of what we don't. I have always pointed to pro wrestling as a microcosm of society because it is so popular with so many different kinds of people in the population. I suggest we pay more attention to what is happening in the ring and ignore the Trump administration. Day 353 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Do you remember who Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss are? Well, you probably don't, and I don't fault you for it because you may not have been following this as closely as I have, so let me remind you. Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss are a mother and daughter who were Atlanta poll workers during the 2020 election, something they had done for many years as productive, upstanding citizens in their community who put in their own time and effort to help a process that they believed in, which is elections. And what happened to them? Well, Rudy Giuliani, the disgraced and disbarred former mayor of New York City, fabricated lies about them, saying that they were complicit in efforts to rig the 2020 election in Georgia. He disparaged them not only with that lie, but also with others that were racist in nature, including suggesting that the women could be seen passing around drugs in the video footage from that night, when in fact they had passed each other a mint. I wouldn't expect Rudy to understand fresh breath. When Rudy was sued to oblivion over these lies, he lost spectacularly. He appealed again and again and lost his appeals again and again. The reason I am reminding you about this today is because Rudy Giuliani continues to evade compensating Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, as the courts have ruled that he must. I think about Ruby Freeman, who many know as Lady Ruby, and Shay Moss on an almost daily basis, especially after they gave incredible testimony to the January 6th committee about how these events have affected their lives. These women are the best among us, and while Rudy Giuliani was once known as America's mayor, I now know him as one of America's most malevolent creations. And as another reason to ignore the Trump administration. Day 354 of 1,461 days of ignoring the Trump administration. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. Senate candidate James Tallarico of Texas is running for the Democratic nomination there against Jasmine Crockett, also a very worthy candidate who I am excited to see continue her ascent in Democratic politics. James Tallarico shot an interview that was scheduled to air on the Stephen Colbert program and did not air because of pressure from the quote-unquote government. And I say government in quotes because that word seems to operate differently these days. This interview, which did not air, has now been seen by a vast audience that would not have seen it if it had merely aired on CBS. Oops. I certainly would not have seen it, although I am familiar with Mr. Tallarico, who seems to be an upstanding individual and a very attractive gentleman, which happens to be an advantage in politics. If you do not think it is an advantage, you are wrong. It is an advantage in life, frankly. I am now even more familiar with Mr. Tallarico. In this interview, he discusses how the Republican Party has long weaponized abortion and gay marriage as two main talking points, even though Jesus makes no mention of either in the Bible. Mr. Tallarico points out so eloquently and coherently that the Bible simply commands that we love God and we love our neighbor. Now, I would counter only to point out that some right-wing Christians today insist that their version of love is still love, but to many of us it feels more aligned with fear, anger, and grievance than with compassion. They seem to think that trying to make you live a life you do not want to live is just loving you, and that you should just find Jesus for Christ's sake. This is to say that I appreciated Mr. Tallarico's words, and while I absolutely adore Jasmine Crockett, I think that Mr. Tallarico will likely receive the Democratic nomination. I am excited to see him win that seat in the Senate, uphold his ideals, and ignore the Trump administration.
Hi, it's Josh. I am at the P. I am proud of myself this morning because my friend here is being asked by another patron about his opinions on Donald Trump, and I, knowing that I have to write this podcast for you, said to myself, no, Josh, you don't have time to join this conversation. I even joked to my friend before returning to the keyboard, I am sitting this one out. I have too much work to do. He laughed. Thanks again for listening. Please leave a 5-star rating for the 1,461 Days of Ignoring with Josh Bloom podcast in your podcast app and leave a comment saying that you like the show. If you feel like leaving a comment about the leader of the Trump administration that says something to the effect of, he isn't a beautiful product like a pound of on-sale ground chicken at ShopRite is, you go right ahead and you do that. Please tell a politically curious friend about the show, and while you're at it, please follow me on all of my social media by going to superjews.com, that's superjews.com, where you will find the links that you are looking for. Lastly, if you would like to throw some support to me and the show, please subscribe to my Substack, which is a platform where I post my writing and send it directly to your email inbox. Go to superjews.substack.com and just enter your email address. You will be pleased that you did. You can also buy me a coffee. For a mere $3, you will earn my undying gratitude, or at least enough gratitude to last until the next time I ask you to buy me a coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Josh Bloom. Please do not forget what this show is for. We are living in trying times that are trying to take our time away from living. The goal with this show, beyond pure entertainment, is to reclaim that time, regain our minds, and focus on what is important. I am not a self-help guru. I'm just trying to help myself. I am glad you are here every week with me. See you next time. Bye.